Well, happy Thursday, people. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And as always, I invite you to notice yourself joining us. And I mean that quite literally. Feel your butt in your seat. Feel the breath in your lungs. Notice the one who is here paying attention. All right. Because with everything that we do, the larger context is awareness practice or meditation. So I can teach some ideas, or I can put you through an exercise or various content of what we're doing together. But the background context is always that I am here bringing awareness to what's happening right now. And that's how the magic happens, is when the present moment compassionate awareness meets whatever your experience is arising in the moment. So this particular meeting we're calling a virtual satsang and conscious conversation in honor of the topic of love, because February is for many folks associated with Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day is associated with love. And love is a greatly misunderstood topic. So it's one of the most closest to my heart, so to speak, and I think most greatly misunderstood. First of all, Valentine's Day gets associated with love in the romantic love sense. And romantic love is, kind of a modern Western phenomenon. The religion, the cult of romantic erotic relationships, it's kind of become, it's kind of replaced religion for a lot of people as sort of like what's supposed to give life meaning. But unfortunately, it's riddled with all kinds of myths, like, you find the person that completes you, your soulmate, then you live happily ever after, gives, they know your soul, you're so connected you don't even have to speak, and all kinds of troublesome beliefs that have cropped up around romantic love. And in reality, as one of my favorite Zen teachers used to say, a little old lady that I hung out with many years ago, she said, relationships don't work. He said, no, let's face it, just get real. Relationships don't work. Now, of course, she went on to elaborate on that, but I thought I knew immediately what she meant. I remember a stand-up comic I also saw said, you know how you can tell that relationships are hard? Because when you ask somebody about how their relationship is, they very often touch their face. Like, hey, John, how's it going with Mary? Oh, it's pretty good, So he was able to make that joke because all of us have had the experience of relationships just seeming so challenging. They hold so much promise, but yet are riddled with pitfalls and peril. And the reason that relationships don't work is because we're trying to get them to do the wrong kind of work. we secretly or unconsciously or perhaps consciously are looking to a relationship to make us happy, to fill the empty space inside. And a relationship can't do that. It might seem to do it for a couple of years. You might be riding the honeymoon train for a couple of years, and it seems like now everything is groovy and my life is complete, and let's be happy ever after. But inevitably, eventually, wherever you go, there you are. Your own old wounds and challenges and empty places start bubbling up in the context of your relationship. In fact, you will start to find that deep intimacy brings all that stuff to the surface like nothing else. Perhaps, on the other side of the coin, you didn't think that relationship would make you happy. You thought that sitting in a cave or being on meditation retreat forever would make you happy, and you achieved some sort of calm, and then you go back and get involved with your family, or you get involved in a relationship, and up comes all that stuff, which points to what relationships actually do work for. Relationships work amazingly for the challenge of learning how to love. Now, obviously, when I say learning how to love, that implies that you don't know how as it is. And that is my claim, that almost all of us think we know how to love, but don't. Sure, we might know how to get attached. We might know how to appreciate people sometimes, feel affection for people sometimes. We may be a good lover, whatever, but we don't know how to love, at least with the capital L love that I am going to be talking about. It's kind of like the Greeks, they had different words for different kinds of love. They were aware that there was a difference between philia and eros and agape. And agape was the spiritual love. And that's different than romantic love. Now, a good romantic or erotic or close relationship hopefully is a training ground and a place to cultivate that capital L agape love. And that's what we're talking about. So what is that? What is that love, and how is it different than what we often mistake for love? The way that people usually use love, it's sort of like extra strong like. There's like a continuum between like and love. And in that mindset, love is like uber like. I really, really like this, which is revealed by the way that people will say, oh, I just love chocolate ice cream or something like that, which is not the kind of love that I'm talking about. But people think of love as a form of emotion and a form of preference or attachment. It's no coincidence that in Spanish, they don't say, I love you. With partners or lovers, they say, te quiero, which means I want you. So wanting and affection and attachment are what usually passes as love. Now, the thing about that kind of love is it's just one half of a polarity, right? every kind of feeling like that is every kind of emotional state exists in polarity, love, hate, or, you know, love, indifference. But the kind of love that we're talking about, the capital L love, is not part of a polarity like that. And it's not about I uber like this instead of I uber hate this or don't like it or want to get away from it. Love, the word love in this context is just sort of a shorthand. Perhaps we could more thoroughly describe it as awareness and acceptance, or consciousness and compassion, which can be brought toward to bear on whatever is arising right now. It's like a higher order willingness and ability to be with what is right now, because that's the only place love can happen, is right now with what's right here. So this kind of love is not an emotional state. Now, it implies a certain kind of friendliness, compassionateness, but as I say, that's kind of a byproduct of the willingness and the presence that you're generating. It's not an emotional state per se, because you can bring this kind of love, this kind of awareness and acceptance to all kinds of different emotional states. If you didn't, if you couldn't, it wouldn't be the kind of love that I'm talking about. Your awareness, and if your awareness and acceptance only applies to feeling good, well, it ain't much in the way of acceptance, right? So paradoxically, the way that I'm using the word love, I mean that you can bring love to how hateful you are in this moment. Now, if the other definition of love, that doesn't make any sense. Either I'm feeling loving or I'm feeling hateful. But the kind of higher order willingness and ability to be with your experience that I'm calling love can embrace all kinds of different experiences. In fact, it needs to. The only way to become more accepting is to become accepting of all the ways in which you're not accepting at all. The only way to paradoxically cultivate more willingness and compassion is to embrace all of your resistance. So it becomes something that's sometimes just growing in around the edges. It's something that you're just sort of leaning in the direction of love to the degree that you are able. It starts creeping in more and more as you strengthen the capacity. And I should hasten to mention that you're not in control of it. You don't say, oh, okay, I'm going to decide to be a loving person. I'm just going to bring all kinds of awareness and acceptance to my experience and to other people from now on. No, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's more like a matter of grace. It arises outside of your conscious control. It arises as a choice sometimes. And you can surround yourself with people and listen to other people and create conditions that increase the likelihood of that grace moving in your life, that increase the likelihood of you tripping into that kind of capital L, love. And it's like a snowball. The more you love, the more you love. The more that arises and that you are able to cultivate that willingness, the more you are able to, and the more you do in the future. You build your capacity for it. And here's the punchline. The idea is that that kind of love changes everything. That your usual ego mind is totally preoccupied with how am I going to fix things? How am I going to get it? How am I going to get what I want? How am I going to make things better? How am I going to avoid a problem? How am I going to fix myself? How am I going to change somebody else? Blah, 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 blah. It's a problem solver. And it's pretty fucking miraculous for a lot of things. It builds cell phones and space telescopes and, you know, automobiles. It's pretty miraculous. But in terms of what we might call an ultimate peace, an ultimate sense of connection to yourself and others, that mind won't ever be able to get there. The process of trying to fix yourself and trying to persuade other people and trying to blah, blah, blah doesn't ever lead to love and peace. It just leads to more of the same process of trying to blah, 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 blah. So the kind of love we're talking about is a total paradigm shift, and it's at a different order. It's like, you know, that is it Gregory Bateson or Albert Einstein that said the thing about you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created it. So that's the kind of practice we're talking about, is at a different level than the thinking, worrying, fixing mind. And I can just say that, and that can sound like pretty, but you don't know it until you know it. And when you are in those experiences where just presence and awareness and compassion transforms things without your effort, you know it, and it feels completely different than anything that you tried to create through force of will. So anyway, that's some general thoughts on the topic of love, and we're going to open it up now and invite any of you to ask questions or make comments. At some point, I will probably have you go into little breakout rooms so you can have a moment to just check in face to face with one other human. Because in this context, there's a bunch of us. We're looking at a screen. There isn't, unless you ask me a question directly, which you're welcome to do, you don't have the opportunity for the one-to-one connection. So I'll give you that in a little bit. But right now, does any brave soul or curious soul or loving soul want to ask a question or make a comment? And if so, we'll try to put you on live video unless you don't have the technology or the willingness.
Yeah, so to share, you just unmute yourself, or I see Ellen's hand up. So Ellen, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you to start.
Okay.
There you go.
Did I unmute myself? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay.
We hear you and see you driving, you brave soul.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm gonna pull over, but so I can ask my question. But I guess I've been meditating almost every day for 20 years, and lately I've been working with some new practices that have really changed my focus and changed what I know about what's happening in my body and my mind when I'm having an emotional reaction that doesn't feel loving. And what I'm really sitting with right now is, when is it ever appropriate to react versus to like sense and report? Like I don't know. I feel so like blown open by how much more clarity and control I feel in choosing my emotions, more so than I ever have in my life. And yet I also feel like I don't know if it's real or not. I'm like, wait, I'm supposed to be reacting and dumping and having some big emotional reaction, but I'm just going into my body right now. And in my
Mm-hmm.
relationship, it feels like I'm not flatlining, but I'm just not. I know I almost don't even recognize it as connection, because I'm like, I got nothing, kind of. I have feelings in my body, but I don't have a lot of drama, which is new. So I'm curious about how, in the quest to be present and loving and accepting, how do you stay with and know when it's time to like engage as though it's real, or engage as though this, do you see what, does that make
I
sense?
do. I
Okay.
do. I hear you loud and clear.
Deborah, maybe you could restate the question a little bit before you answer. That'd be helpful.
I hear it as a question about how do you know when to kind of honor a feeling by responding to it or moving into action, and when to not buy into a feeling and instead be the witness of that, and um, uh, to when to act and when to just bring awareness and acceptance to what's arising.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, the thinking mind, that fix-it mind that I was talking about, wants to know the answer to that question. Says,
Right.
oh, well, clearly this is a dilemma that's coming up again and again. So what am I supposed to do? How do I do this? What's the answer? And of course, that is playing on the fix-it mind's terms. It
Yeah.
thinks that there is an answer. It thinks that I can decide that, or I can have a policy, and then I will know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's not actually how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's not how it works in the practice that I'm talking about. That is how it works for ego thinking mind. It generates policies, it generates a strategy, it tries to enact that strategy as faithfully as possible, blah, blah, blah. But what we're talking about instead is using this loving, present awareness to be in direct contact with life and letting life lead you in one direction or another. So life in a given moment tells you, sit still, wait. Life in a given moment tells you, speak, move, engage, and there's no policy or strategy involved. It's a now moment that says, do this. And because you're getting better at loving and listening, you're getting all of that fearful trying to figure it out of the way. There's less noise in the system, and so you are more available to the in the moment impulse, to the in the moment information. Now, it's also true that over time, the pendulum swings. The pendulum swings. So if you have been in the past a very passionate, reactive kind of person, then maybe there's a larger pendulum swing, which takes you over into the realm of like, whoa, course correction, time to slow the fuck down and be quiet and really see what's going on, wait before you leap, and all of that, And that may be a period of time that you go through before the pendulum swings back in the other direction and the other direction. And the pendulum swings start getting smaller and smaller. I sort of look at it as if you're walking down the path and you're trying to stay on the path, or what the Buddhists call the razor's edge, but you step off to the right and then you try to get back on, and then you step off to the left and then you get back on, and you keep, it's like, one Zen master said, the life of Zen is a life of one constant mistake. I think he meant you just keep noticing, whoops, that was a little too much. Whoops, that was too far. Oops, without any complaint. It's just a noticing that it's time for a course correction. So it's a great question. It's a rich inquiry. And until you're, enlightened, then you probably will never resolve the issue. But the way that I, even though it smacks of being a strategy or an agenda, which is of course what I'm saying we're getting away with, my provisional agenda is you bring awareness and acceptance to all that's arising. And as you're able and inspired, act. So you're being with what is, you're accepting what's arising, and you're noticing inspiration and ability to act. And that's the big question. When are you really inspired, or when are you just reacting because you can't sit still any longer? Who knows?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great question. What we're going to do next is a interpersonal meditation, an interpersonal awareness practice. So in the same way that I was just saying, bringing awareness and acceptance to all that's arising, and as you're able and inspired, act. This is an interpersonal version of that, where you connect with one other person, look in their eyes as best you can over a computer. If both of you get your eyes close to where the camera is on your computer, it helps. Like if you see, looking at your own picture, your eyes look close to where you're going to be looking for camera. So you look at each other and you drop in and you really notice what's arising in you right now as you make a connection with this person. What sensations do you feel in your body? What kind of emotional tone do you have? Like, are you drawn, or are you a little fearful or guarded, and what kind of thoughts or judgments are going through your mind? Oh, I think this person's cool, or oh, I don't know about them. Or the point is, it's actually, there's no good or bad to any of it. It's not better for you to feel warm and friendly than it is for you to feel guarded and skeptical. Whatever arises in you in the moment of connection with another is equally welcome. That's why you're bringing acceptance, not just awareness of what's arising, but acceptance to whatever's arising. And then the part about as you're able and inspired, act, in this case means speak. Name something you notice about what's going on with you to this other person. Oh, I notice I'm feeling warm in my chest as I look at you. I appreciate you for the way you're looking at me. Or, oh, I notice I'm kind of tense and I'm worrying about what you might want from me, or, how I look, or, whatever. Whatever you notice arising right now is fair game for what we call naming it out loud in this moment. That doesn't mean a usual conversation. That doesn't mean like, how are you doing this morning? Or, What do you think of what he just was saying? Or that's not it. We're talking about the awareness practice of naming what you notice right now out loud to somebody else. So if you've never done any of our workshops, experiment. It may sound a little unusual, but just play around with it. You'll just have a few minutes and go back and forth as you are moved. So notice, how was that for you? How present did you experience yourself being with another being? It sounds like something that should be easy, but is actually quite challenging for most of us. There's something about unadulterated presence, unadulterated awareness and acceptance that is scary for the ego. He's like, but what do I do now? How do I manage this situation? What could go wrong? And at the same time, to the degree that we're able to relax into it, we can experience it as a relief. Ah, yes. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. I'm just here. Oh, and I get to be here with you. So now we've got about 15 minutes left. And if any of you want to jump on to say anything about either how that was for you or any reactions or questions that you're having right now, you are welcome.
Yeah, and you can do that by either raising your hand or just unmuting yourself. You can unmute yourself without my help.
And contrary to what Manal said earlier, if you don't want to be this video, any video of you to be ever seen again by anyone else, let me know. Usually sometimes I post these conversations just because they're helpful to other people. But if you don't want to be seen, don't. Just let me know.
I will share just briefly.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, that I just love to feel ashamed of myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just like really always generating shame constantly. So that was there, and I'm trying not to judge it.
Beautiful. Yeah, the way that these processes like shame work is that they're usually self-reinforcing. It's sort of like, I feel ashamed. Oh, and then I notice I feel ashamed. So now I'm ashamed of feeling ashamed. And now I'm ashamed of feeling ashamed of feeling ashamed. So that's what you mean about the process won't ever lead to a different outcome. It just leads to more of the same process.
Yep.
And yes, it's great if you can have a little bit of a sense of humor about it. Oh, yep, that's my gig. I'm a world-class shamer. You know, I can out-shame myself better than anybody. Let's have a shame off, and I will kick your ass in the realm of self-shaming.
I would win a gold medal.
I bet.
For sure, in the shame Olympics.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the irony is, the more that you can drop the process of shaming yourself for shaming yourself for shaming yourself, the more that awareness and acceptance starts to dissolve it.
Mm-hmm.
Like its hardness, its solidity starts to dissolve. Oh yeah, there's that little story. Uh-huh. There's that contraction and lack of breathing. Uh-huh. And it just starts it's like your awareness and acceptance is a solvent. that starts to dissolve that.
Appreciate you for saying that, Tabor. Got a little sadness, a little appreciation. Noticed when you said that. Appreciate you. Thank
And
you.
I appreciate you for sharing. Just for folks that aren't familiar with the practice, when I say I appreciate you for saying that, it's not a theoretical thing. It's a way of naming that there's a movement of warmth or expansion or softening happening in the body in the moment. It's not like, I appreciate you on principle. It's like I'm naming something I can notice right now. Sometimes people say, they appreciate somebody or they forgive somebody or they love somebody because they think they should, not because they can actually notice it happening in the moment. All right. Anyone else? Fiona.
Yeah, I noticed that when I just said this, like I felt uncomfortable being seen and I was judging myself, and when I said that out loud, the feeling went away and I felt really connected to Sophia at the end.
Beautiful. Well, that's the secret. That's the secret. When we do a good job of naming what we notice right now, that which we are noticing changes. Or at least it's more likely to, or it changes more quickly. The irony is when you're resisting what's arising right now, which is how most of us live most of the time, it perpetuates what's arising. It's like by being in conflict with myself, I get to live with being in conflict with myself. And when I can bring this kind of awareness and acceptance to some experience that I was previously resisting or rejecting, it's sort of like that experience can kind of bloom, say its piece, share what it needs to, and move on. And then the next one arises, and then the next one arises, and your experience becomes more flowing instead of chunky and sort of like you become an open tube that can allow these different experiences to flow through you, which is a much less stressful way to live. So yeah, that's the way you know that you're telling the truth, is that the truth keeps changing. When you name the truth about your own experience, you feel it. There's like, yeah, that is true. Yes, thank you for putting my experience into words. And there's a movement that goes with that. Great. Thank you, Fiona. Any other questions or comments or observations or heckling?
Tabor, one question. Hey.
Hey, Uwe.
I wonder if naming and accepting, as you say, kind of like cures the symptom to symptom, so to say, symptom hopping, and really gets to the wound, so to say, to the stuff underneath. That's my question. Does it make sense to you what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I sort of envision a person as like an onion that's got these layers of defenses that they have built up around those wounds, those vulnerable places that you're talking about. And those layers can be gently peeled back or dissolved with this kind of awareness and naming what you notice right now that I'm talking about. And so when you notice some particular kind of defensive strategy or compensatory little dance that you're doing in the moment, and you're able to name that out loud, bring some awareness and acceptance to it, and it can dissolve in the way that I was talking to Heather about, then you may notice a deeper layer come to the fore and a deeper layer come to the fore. And as you do that, your experience becomes less wordy, less mental, less strategic, and more just sort of this raw experiencing moment to moment, less wordy, more embodied, more spontaneous, less habitual. Yeah. And when you do that, that wound, that old wounding is healed spontaneously.
I see. Kind of like homeopathic, so to say, like a treatment.
I suppose so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Notice how, even when we're all just sitting here in silence, and there may be nobody else in your room, it feels different than being by yourself, doesn't it? There's a kind of a palpable something that I experience just being in the same virtual room with all of you. And I enjoy that. I really appreciate you all for being here, even when we're just sitting quietly. I had a spiritual teacher that I worked with closely for a couple of years, and we would spend 2 or 3 hours a week on the phone. And much of that time was in silence. But those silences on the phone with him were felt intense. And at one point, I kind of admitted sheepishly, with a little embarrassment, like, oh, I know I could just be meditating by myself, and I should be just as willing to do that, and that should be just as good for me. It's kind of silly that I'm attached to being on the phone with you in silence. And he said, oh no, that wouldn't be the same at all. He said, yeah, awareness is synergistic. And when you and I join our awareness with each other, even from long distance, awareness doesn't care about physical spaces. And all of that was a little buzzy woo-woo to me at first to hear from him, a little kind of like, whoa. But, and if I'm honest, that's my experience. That's how it feels to me. So I'm enjoying my imagining of synergy between all of us in this realm. And I invite all of you, if you're not already involved with us, to get more involved with us, because that's what we're about. We're about building communities, residentially, in person, online, that are about this synergy of awareness and acceptance and learning to love together. And I spent years living and studying in a Zen center and doing lots of hardcore spiritual practice of the more cave-oriented variety. And I loved that, and it was powerful for me. But I think that the 21st century spiritual practice is going to be this kind of interpersonal meditation. And that's what I'm excited about exploring. Like Thich Nhat Hanh said, the next time the Buddha comes, the Buddha will probably be a community, not an individual. So I'm excited about how we can co-create this kind of conscious community and see what emerges out of that space. So if that calls to you, you're very invited. We'll be doing in-person workshops here in San Diego and in Oakland, and I'll be doing retreats and workshops in Europe this summer, and join our mailing list. And we have regular Zoom calls like this, so reach out. You're welcome.